And welcome to the third video of the H612 4K Vantop. And I've been teasing this video for some time now. You may have seen my prior video where I talked about the ongoing Vantop situation, and also my second video where I show what actually killed my Vantop H612T. But I'm also curious to find out in the teardown why my dashcam opened up like that. And as you can see, if I push it back in, it pops open again. The lithium battery in here has degraded and has now gone into that mode where they tend to expand or tend to balloon up. It's almost as if they were getting ready to explode, and that ballooning process is opening up or forcing this case open, which is a pretty scary situation. But let's open this up and let's find out. I'm actually gonna use the same spatula that it came with to open it up, and I'm gonna put the spatula gently in here. There's a couple of clips, as you can see, in here and here and here and so on around the dash cam, and those little clips is what holds both of the parts together. I'm just gonna gently pop those open. Ooh, that's it, we are in. All right, let's see what's inside of this bad boy. Ooh, interesting. So here we have the display. We have a couple of ribbon cables going to the PCB board. And what do you know? Here is the culprit. This is the battery, and sure enough, it ballooned up, which explains why it popped this thing open. Let's get a closer look at this. And here's the 3.7 volts, 500 milliamp hours lithium battery with a day code of 2020 May 28. And sure enough, look at that. It is ballooned up tremendously. Now, what you see on here, this did not come out of the battery. This is some kind of epoxy that they're using to hold the battery in place. And I had a couple viewers ask me about, is it possible to replace the battery on a dash cam? So I'm gonna attempt to pull all of this tape off and see if it would be in theory possible or not. So it is definitely possible to swap out the battery. As you saw, opening up the case was fairly non-destructive, and the battery itself is just soldered to the PC board with two wires, a red one and a black one. So I could technically desolder those and solder a brand new one in there. I'm not sure what manufacturer is SJ. If you guys are able to ID who made this battery with this SJ initials, please share that in the comments down below. But now let's attempt to separate the display from the main controller board. There's probably gonna be a ribbon cable down there that we can disconnect. Let's get these things off. By the way, the black tape that you see right here is literally just an anti-static tape that's holding the cables down, but the tape that you see right here that has a different color, that has some metallization, so this probably is being used to conduct either static for ESD purposes or for shielding, so they are not the same. And here you can see how that conductive tape is being used, is joining this cable right here that has been shielded with it and is grounding that directly to the shielded case right here. And we have three cables that control and power the display. In order to release them, I'm gonna lift very gently on this tab right here. That releases one of them. Moving over to the next one, and I'm being careful not to damage the cable, the ribbon cable. I'm being careful only to lift the tab, this little bar right here, to release it. And then this can slide out. And that separates the display from the main controller unit. Here is the part number or a label that has some kind of part number or date coding that's on the display. If anybody wants to punch that in and try to ID who actually made the display. But there's another number over here, and it's a little hard to tell. Looks like a L116601G, and then the letters JXC. Again, this could potentially be a date code or could be an internal part number, but if anybody can ID this component, it'd be awesome if you guys can share that in the comments. So it looks like I got a little bit ahead of myself. To remove the front display, it's actually only two connectors that have to be open. The third connector that I open up right here, that goes to the front sensor. And talking about the front sensor, let's get this guy out and let's look at it closer. But check this out, isn't it a cool find? You can see the part number PYA510HS and then the magic number IMX415, the Vantop H612T. For a long time, there has been rumors that it was upscaling video because the sensor in the front was not capable of 4K recording. But if this number is an indication of the sensor that's in the front, IMX415 is capable of native 4K recording. So this is a great indication. Again, if you guys are able to narrow any information down as far as source from this part number, share that in the comments. But now let's get these things off. Ooh, very cool. Look at that. That is the sensor, and then we have the lenses right in front. And we can further take out the lenses by pulling on here. Yep. Oh, wow. Very cool. And this is a great example of how a dashcam manufacturer can specify a front lens and a rear sensor, so we end up with different combinations. You may have two dashcams that run the same sensor, but you might have two different front lenses in there. And even if the lenses are of the same angle or the same f-stop, sometimes the lenses are being manufactured by different people. So a lot of dashcams may share components, but the combination of those different components and different sources yield different results. But look how cool the sensor looks. Just it changes almost colors as you move it around, and look how small it is too in comparison to my finger. But let's continue the teardown with the microphone that is located here, and as you can see, it is connected to something in here, and from here it goes to the main PCB. So let me get this stuff off. And here's that PCBA that sits in between the microphone and the main board. And because the Vantop H612T supports voice commands, and this is connected to the microphone, I am not sure if this is part of what enabled it to recognize voice or if the work was being done up here in the main unit. It's just kind of interesting that it sits between the main unit and the microphone. I'll put the part number of this unit that I got under heavy magnification up here in the screen. So if you guys want to identify that part and let us know what it is. But let's also look at the little speaker that sits right next to the battery. It's also held with some kind of epoxy. I'm gonna see if I can lift this out of its position. Yep. Oh, nice. Very cool. Tiny little speaker, but it works. And in fact, in my opinion, it's actually sufficiently loud where I was able to play back videos on the dashcam and understand what people were saying, or just in general, hear the audio from the video clip that I wanted to play on my dashcam. But before I remove the PC board from the main unit, let's look at the power button, which is right here. And you also see what appears to be a second speaker, probably for debugging, something that would just make a beeping sound, not heard by the users probably at the factory. And what you see on here are little test points. These little, what we call pads. You will have a probe when this is being manufactured that comes down, touches those pads. You can see that receiving, transmitting, and that would allow it to either communicate, program, talk to this unit, and confirm it or test it. You'll also see that there are two additional connectors here that are not being used. One of them is labeled key, so this was potentially maybe for another configuration, something else quite interesting. And we also see a part number on here, again for those internet detectives out there that want to punch that in and see if you guys can track down who makes this PC board or who makes the main unit. It'd be interesting to find out. Remember, manufacturers are sometimes different than the brands that you are buying. A brand normally outsources manufacturing to other companies, sub-companies, subcontractors, and they actually make the product. But also check this out, RTC BAT. Normally this would stand for real-time clock battery. And I had a viewer that was asking if it was possible to convert this from a battery to a supercapacitor. I'm not sure if that's entirely possible without adding a whole little PCBA that can control the way that supercapacitor charges, but as you can see, there is some kind of support on here for another battery that may control the time. But also let's take a look at the connectors on the top. We have the GPS, we have the SD memory card, we have the input for the rear camera, and we have that mini USB connector. Now notice that the connectors are laying flat in the same orientation as the board, and that's just the way that the connectors are made. And this keeps a low profile, keep this assembly somewhat relatively thin, because remember, there is more stuff that goes on the front. And this is a reason why we have not seen dash cams that have connectors that come out the back. And if an attempt was being made to hide the cables by having the connectors come out the back, that means I'm gonna have to take this connector and flip it in this direction. As opposed to laying flat, it will have to be standing up. So now what took a little bit of space is gonna take a lot more space, maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 times as much space as this takes right now. In fact, there's probably gonna be another PC board that is gonna be needed to hold that connector in the upright shape, and now the whole dashcam is gonna get tremendously thicker. It is not impossible, but that is the reason why we have not seen connectors that come out the back. They come out from the top. This is also the reason why we see so many similar dash cams in terms of the form factor. This form factor works and is thin. As soon as we start changing something in here or trying to reinvent the wheel, it's gonna cost money, potentially it's not gonna work. So normally for a company, the cheapest route is just to take inspiration from what's out there, or in this case, keep it simple. PC board lays flat, the connectors lay flat, and everything stays low profile. Now that's not to say that there should not be innovation in advancing dashcam and the way that they work or hiding cables, but this is just the explanation of why we see similarities in between dashcams. Now this particular dashcam failed because this connector wore out. Is it possible to replace this connector? Yeah, it is actually very possible. In fact, this connector is extremely cheap. I do have the tools to do it, and I do have the training to do it. This is a surface mount connector, so I could desolder and I could install another one on there. Is it worth to do it? In my opinion, no. The time for me to set it up, order the parts, it's cheaper for me just to buy another dashcam or move over to a different dashcam altogether. And now we can finally see what's behind this PCBA. And there it is. And again, this is more shielding right here. And here is the reset button that is accessed through a little orifice in the case. But there is another button right here. This button is not accessible from the outside. Let's try to push that one. Oh yeah, here we go. Ooh. But I also want to show you that in addition to shielding, this metal portion also acts as a heat sink. You can see that there's a thermal pad on here which conducts the heat away from the main processor. And I'm going to move this out of the way so we can look at that processor a little bit closer, which is really the main star of the show, in addition to that IMX415 imaging sensor. You can see that this processor is part number Hi3559, made by a company called HiSilicon. This is quite known in the dashcam world. This company makes a lot of processors for a lot of dashcams. It's quite common. In fact, we've seen a Hi3559 version on the Red Tiger T27. We also have another component right here. This may be a memory module. I'm not sure what it is. I'll put a picture, a close-up picture up here if anybody can identify it. And we also have another little processor here. This appears to be an imaging processor, and it says Pixel Plus PR2020. So this is probably doing some of the imaging. But now let's look at what's on the other side inside of this unit. And let's see if this side pops as easily as the other one did. Yep, here we go. All right, got this thing off. Turn this around. And again, this is just shielding right now. There is no thermal pad on here, so this was not making contact with any of these components. So it was probably mostly just used for shielding purposes more than any kind of heat dissipation. Now, first off, we have another hidden switch. Let's confirm that. Yep, one more switch right here. And there is another component right here, not sure if it's memory. And there's a couple of other items, including some kind of labeling. Let's look at that one. Let's look at the part number. 7753B200 AMWG. So not sure if this means anything to anybody out there, but this is very familiar. We've seen that in here, the same nomenclature and some kind of decoding system on here. And let's put a picture of this guy and this guy up in the screen, a little bit bigger, magnified, in case anybody's curious on finding out what those things are and what they actually do. But also notice this little detail on the back of the enclosure. This is where the PCBA was sitting. This is where the speaker was sitting. And any of the openings, they have placed this little tape, what almost look like a mesh. And what the purpose of that tape is, if you flip that over, this is where there is openings. Anywhere that there is openings, whether it's for us to be able to hear a speaker or for ventilation to come through, they went through the trouble of putting this mesh on there, which is gonna keep anything from falling in there. And having come from the manufacturing world, I can tell you this kind of stuff adds a lot of time in production, in manufacturing, having to individually place little pieces of tape like this on specific areas, and it looks like it was done by hand, adds time and adds the process steps. And every time you're adding a process step, you're adding cost to the manufacturer of a product. And they could have probably gotten away with not putting that on there and nobody would have noticed, but stuff would have fallen in there. So I like that little detail that they went to this level of care for the product to make sure nothing fell inside and damaged the PC board during the lifetime of the product. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the teardown and disassembly of the Vantop H612T 4K Mirror Dashcam. As you saw, it's a very elegantly designed dashcam. There is not a lot in here, and when you have less part, that means that there's less complexity and less things that can go wrong. Now the battery did fail, and it's one of the reasons why we're seeing manufacturers go to super capacitors over batteries, but now people have to hardwire their dashcams if they want parking mode with a battery. Sometimes you're able to get away without having to hardwire the dashcam because of the battery. The other thing that we saw is the use of standard components such as the IMX sensor from Sony. Sony makes a ton of different IMX sensors, just like HiSilicon makes different kinds of processors for dashcams. So that it is the reason why we see commonality across dashcams. They're using standard components and they all kind of come up with their own version of them. But for example, the shape of the mirror can only be so many shapes, which leaves a lot of dashcams looking very similar because that is just the form factor, leading potential customers to think, well, they're really all the same, when in fact the small differences in them or within them are what makes a particular dashcam special for somebody. And if you guys have any other questions regarding the Vantop H612T, please put that in the comments down below. If you enjoy this type of teardown videos and want to see more like it, let me know in the comments also. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to support the channel and stay tuned as I have a lot more dashcam videos coming up for you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.